Well, hello, and welcome to episode 110 of Drink the Movies. I'm Brian here, as always, with Michaela. And Michaela, Auld Lang Syne. We are in 2023 now, 2022, get out of here. But what did you do to celebrate? Ball was coming down. What'd you get into?
Oh, I drank a lot of Freixenet. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they actually, for the first time, I don't think I'd ever seen it before, but they had the pink sparkling Freixenet, and of course,
Oh,
I
okay.
love the color pink, so I had to get me some of that. Um, and then for Christmas,
Freixenet, we
my
should tell people, is a cava from Spain. If you're not
yeah, we should
familiar
say
with what
that if you
with
don't
what
know
that
what that
is,
is.
yeah.
Yeah, and then I got these really fun bottles of like mimosa makers for Christmas.
Hmm.
Somebody gave me that, and they're like juices and they're all natural and stuff, and you add them to glasses of champagne or prosecco or whatever it is bubbles that you have. And
Okay.
so I did some of those, and those were fun. And I'm going to post some pictures of those because that is a really easy way to spruce up some bubbles if you want, without having to do anything but open another bottle and pour it in. So that's fun.
Yeah,
What about you? What
absolutely.
did you drink?
Yeah, so New Year's was pretty low key around here. We've been doing a lot of traveling for Christmas and kind of the lead up into Christmas. So we just kind of hung out, the wife and I, listened to some records. We did not stay up until midnight, so I guess failure there. But one of the successes I had was I made myself a gin and tonic, which featured one of the ingredients from this week, a grapefruit liqueur from Gifford's. Had that bottle to make this week's cocktail. I'm like, what else should I do with that? I should put it into a gin and tonic because grapefruit is my jam and gin and tonics are my jam. And what a better way to ring out the new year than with one of the favorite cocktails. So just put a little splash of that grapefruit liqueur in there into the gin and tonic, and it was really delicious and a perfect kind of lighter drink. Way to kind of ring in the new year. You're snacking all day on meats and cheeses and all the
Yeah.
all the accoutrement you put out for New Year's Eve and those kinds of things. So that was a perfect little cocktail to ring out the new year, and then to ring in the new year. What a better way to start than by watching one of the greatest films of all time? And that's what we're going to be doing this week, Michaela, in Shawshank Redemption. So why don't we do this? Why don't we take a quick break? We will be right back to take that grapefruit liqueur, put it into something pretty amazing. So we're going to be take a quick break and we will be right back.
There is something, Brian, about the word pamplemousse that is just amazing.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It is probably my favorite French word. And for anybody that doesn't know, pamplemousse is actually grapefruit. So this
Yep.
this cocktail comes to us, and pays and uses a lot of different types of grapefruit in many forms, rather.
It
And it
does.
pays homage to our main character, Andy Dufresne, in this epic prison escape that we have, where he escapes to Mexico. And yeah, this was a very interesting cocktail to make. I'm gonna let you explain this grapefruit liqueur business because that I feel I don't think I'd ever used that before.
Oh, yeah, no, that was a new ingredient to me for sure. So, this cocktail is called the Coast of Dufresne. We get it from the Washington Post. And yeah, it pays homage to Andy Dufresne and his escape out of prison and down to the coast of Mexico. I think it describes it as imagining what Andy would be drinking as he watched the sunrise in Mexico. And yeah, this cocktail is perfect for that because I took one sip of it and I said, this is the absolutely most perfect brunch cocktail I've ever had because I am a big fan of grapefruit and grapefruit juice, and that is what this cocktail is capitalizing on. So let's
Yeah.
mix one of these up, Michaela. We're going to put into a shaker tin with some ice. You're going to put in 2 ounces of grapefruit juice, a half ounce of lime juice, 1.5 ounces of white rum, a half ounce of that grapefruit liqueur. We used Gifford's creme de pamplemousse, a quarter of an ounce of an allspice dram. We're going to talk about that more here in a second, and a quarter ounce of demerara syrup. If you don't have demerara sugar, you can just use probably just regular simple syrup or any kind of simple syrup that you want to make up there with sugar. So you're going to put that into a strainer with ice, shake it, and then strain it into a tall Collins glass with ice. garnish it with the grapefruit wedge and a mint sprig, and sip and enjoy. Like I said, the best brunch cocktail of them all. This was delicious, Michaela.
Yeah, this was we're starting off the year with the bar really high. And I just want to say that I had no idea it was going to taste this good. It had a couple ingredients that I didn't really know how we were going to do. I couldn't find grapefruit liqueur, so Brian, you were very nice to let me have some.
Mhm.
I also had no idea where I could find allspice dram.
Yep.
And so we're going to talk about that. So I didn't know if this was going to be any good or not. I thought it was going to be much more of a kind of a nod to a Paloma because of the grapefruit, but
Mhm.
it's so much richer tasting than that to me.
Yeah, it gets a lot of kind of this richness and complexity, and kind of almost this tiki feel from that
Hmm.
allspice dram. So let's tackle that one first. So an allspice dram, for people that don't know it, it's basically like it's a liqueur. It's kind of akin to a bitter, but basically what it is it's allspice berries, and it's usually made with some sort of like fortified rum. So you can make this yourself, which I've done, which is what I actually used, or you can buy it, which I've done, which I have a bottle of too, because an allspice dram is an ingredient in one of my favorite cocktails. So I was kind of familiar with it. But basically it's like a bitter in the sense of like the world of tiki drinks. Allspice berries
Hmm.
come from like the Caribbean,
Yeah.
Central America regions. So it's big kind of in those cuisines, and therefore in the cocktails. So you'll see allspice dram in a lot of tiki recipes if you're familiar with those. Like I said, I use it in one of my favorite cocktails, which is the flannel, which is something that I make every fall. But yeah, so you can make your own. There's a lot of really good recipes online. You basically are just taking like a Navy strength rum, putting some allspice berries in it and a little bit of sugar, and then letting that sit for a couple of weeks, and then you can add some water if you want to, dilute out that ABV, kind of however you want to do it, or you can buy one. But yeah, it gives it like this little bit of kind of umptiousness. It's not just
Yeah.
it's not like a grapefruit bomb coming at you. There's more going
Right.
on.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I don't know. The Demerara syrup I've made, I just made simple syrup with Demerara. And I
Mhm.
hadn't done that before. It took a little bit longer because the Demerara, while it's like freeze dried cane sugar or brown sugar or something, it adds like this kind of a silky mouthfeel, I think, that would be different if you use just regular simple syrup or just like agave. It was more almost like mapley, which really
Mhm.
helps with the rum. It's just I don't know that it was really good. And of course, anytime I can say pamplemousse like 16 times in a row
Yeah.
is always a good time for me. I thought this was really good. It was the sweet taste of freedom, and also grapefruit. Really good.
Freedom and grapefruit. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, this was perfect. It was a lot more complex than you might imagine. Just some grapefruit juice and some white rum. If you
Yeah.
can't find the grapefruit liqueur, it's kind of harder to come by. You could probably use something like a triple sec. Might work in a pinch for you, something like that. Some Grand Marnier, something like that. And the allspice dram, if you can't find that, you don't want to be bothered with making it. You could probably just put in a few dashes of just some regular Angostura bitters. You could put in just
Yep.
a splash maybe, or like a teaspoon of like a spiced rum, or maybe like a combination of the spiced rum and bitters
Yeah.
to kind of get you in the ballpark. It's not going to be quite the same, but it's going to be a good approximation maybe before you go out and spend some money on procuring your own
Yeah.
allspice dram.
For sure. I mean, I've tried it both ways. So I tried it with the spiced rum. So I just used, I think it's the Kraken extra spicy spiced rum because
Mhm.
I was like, let's make it as spicy as we can. And that was fine. And then I did see that a good substitution was also the Angostura bitters. That was okay, but it made it really tart for me. And so
Okay.
I think that if I were not going to make it myself, or I was going to kind of do a poor man's version of allspice dram, I would just take some spiced rum and add some allspice to it and leave it alone for a little while. Or, maybe experiment with the super fast kind of um,
Mm, yeah.
infusion that we do with the whipped cream
Right. Yeah.
dispenser.
Hmm.
I didn't do that this time, But I don't know. I if you do, you got to be careful if you're going to use the Angostura bitters and only do like a couple shakes. That's not going to be a quarter ounce. It's going to be less than that. But trust me, if you do a quarter ounce, you might regret it. I know I did.
Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't my favorite. It was much better with just the rum. So
Yeah, so give that a try. At home. This was a really great cocktail. I plan on revisiting this one a lot. And like I said, perfect for a brunch, I think. So give that a try. If you don't want to, you can have 3 beers after retarring a roof. So Michaela, we have these made. I'm gonna mix up another one because this was delicious. I think you should go grab another one, and we're gonna take a quick break, and we will be back to chat about one of the top films of all time. A lot of people's favorite films, and one of just the world's favorite films, Shawshank Redemption. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back to chat about it.
spoiler warning for Shawshank Redemption. If you've not yet seen this film, I'm very sorry for you because you're missing out. So what you need to do right now is press pause and you need to go watch it. And then you need to make a Dufresne cocktail and enjoy that on the beach at the end, because we're going to talk about all the things. Yeah, this is a long journey film. I feel like for a short story film, a lot of things happen for a very short story. It's like 125 pages. And we're going to get into all that. But before we close out on the spoiler warning, we are definitely going to talk about all the things. So if you haven't seen it, honestly, we're not going to do it justice. I mean, I feel like this is one of those really epically amazing films. We're not going to be able to talk about it in all the ways that we can, because we're trying to keep this shorter than the actual film. So go watch the film and then come back and we can chat about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this movie came out in 1994. It was directed by Frank Darabont, and it stars Tim Robbins as our incoming prisoner, Andy Dufresne, whose name we used for that cocktail there. And it also stars Morgan Freeman as Ellis Boyd Redding, aka Red. He is our friend on the inside, and he can get whatever we need to make our time at Shawshank a little bit more tolerable. And as you mentioned, Michaela, this was based on a short story by one Stephen King, Rita Hayworth, and The Shawshank Redemption. We talked about another movie that was a Stephen King short story. If you remember that, Stand By Me.
Absolutely. We made a really fun blueberry martini cocktail for that one. I'm really proud. I'm really proud of both cocktails that we've done for our Stephen King movies that were short stories. It's interesting. Stephen King does amazing work. He writes short stories. He writes, very long 1,000-page epic novels. But we haven't covered any of those yet. We've done the short stories, and this is also an amazing tale. It's got this was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. It didn't win any of them, which is a real shame. I think that was one of the biggest shocks for that year. But it was up for Best Actor. Morgan Freeman was up for Best Actor. It was for Best Adapted Screenplay. It was up for Best Cinematography, Best Sound, Best Film Editing, Best Original Score, and Best Picture. And routinely, when I ask folks, as I get to know them in kind of an icebreaker, what their favorite movie is, this film is resoundingly number one on people's list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's number one on a lot of people's list. It's we're gonna talk a little bit more kind of about the legacy piece of this, but I think since like 2008, it's been the highest rated film on IMDb every year for the last 14 years. So yeah, it has a lot of that going for it, and we'll talk a little bit about kind of the reasons why we think that is. After we kind of wrap up, and we're going to touch back on those 7 Academy Award nominations that it got, and kind of what that means, and the time and space of movies and what it meant to some things. But let's talk about the film a little bit. We're not going to go through all the beats of this. It's a pretty long movie. It covers a lot of ground in some ways, and in other ways I feel like it doesn't. It covers kind of this small thing, even though it's spanning kind of the lifetime of these inmates. But let's get into this one a little bit, Michaela. So to get this thing started off, we see our our hero of the story, I guess, maybe kind of. Andy Dufresne. He is in a car. He is drinking straight from the bottle, a little flask of bourbon. He's got a gun, and he is sitting outside of a house where we are led to believe that his wife is doing some not so good things with her tennis instructor or golf instructor,
He's a
golf pro,
golf pro. Yeah.
golf pro. And unfortunately, when that happens, some bad things happen, and Andy is sentenced to 2 life sentences for killing his wife and her lover.
Yep.
And that's kind of how the story gets set up there.
Yeah. And he's pretty honest. I love the way they show this piece because they show him in the car. They show him, with a gun, loading it, unloading it, reloading it. They show him getting very drunk. Don't do that. That is where we don't do that here at Drink the Movies. However, what I love about this is that in the story itself, Andy is very honest with the fact that he went outside. He was outside their house, or this golf pro's house. He knew, he thought that his wife would be inside. He didn't really know what he was going to do, but he wasn't thinking clearly. But he did not kill them. He didn't shoot them. What he did was he decided, after he'd sobered up a little bit, he came to his senses and said, this isn't worth it. So he throws the gun away and goes home. And that's really convenient or inconvenient, depending on how you think about it, because since there was no weapon that he had, they were able to pin this totally on him. And it doesn't look good, right? Because he's admitting that he was at the scene. He was admitting he had a gun. He was admitting he thought maybe he wanted to kill them at one point. So yeah, he gets set up for life. And this is in the north east. This is in, I think, Maine, right? And
Yep.
And so where does he go? I mean, this is the late 40s. So he's going to go to this place called Shawshank. It is a real forbidding looking prison. Everything's made of stone. And I love the opening scene where they're kind of showing the grounds. It's very sweeping and very epic, kind of almost like a war scene where you have like the battlefield, only instead of a battlefield, it's this big kind of fort at the front of the prison, and then all the grounds. And we get to it slowly kind of focuses in on the yard where we meet our second kind of hero character, played by Morgan Freeman, and his name is Red. And he is this guy who in prison, he can get you things. So if you need cigarettes or shoelaces or a book or anything that you want, there's always apparently there's always a guy who can get it for you. And he has spent his entire time in prison learning to be that guy. And
Yeah,
the film it's from his perspective, right? So the story is from his point of view, and then the film itself, it kind of tells the story from his point of view. So of course, Morgan Freeman's really beautiful, rich voice is kind of overlaid across some of these scenes that we see and stories that he tells.
Yeah, that's right. So Red is the man on the inside. He can get you what you need. And yeah, it is kind of told from his perspective, right? He's doing the narrating of this of the story. Basically, he's telling you who Andy Dufresne is and kind of how their friendship and things start to blossom. I really like kind of this opening scene as you see the prisoners coming into the prison, and you see the existing prisoners there who are making bets on who they think is going to be the first one to kind of have like this breakdown and stuff like that. It kind of is setting the stage for what kind of a place this is. And you mentioned a little bit about kind of the cinematography of the way that this prison looks. And this is an actual prison. It's actually about 30 minutes from where I grew up at the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio. So it is right there. So it's a real place you can go to and check out if you feel so inclined. But yeah, it's just like this dauntingly beautiful, large, very very fortress kind of like this European castle almost, and they do a lot of kind of low angle shots on it, so it looks kind of larger than life, whereas Shawshank is kind of its own character in this story. And we get Andy, he's coming into the prison, they make the bet, they're talking about who's going to break first, and we get our first night kind of in prison. And then pretty hurriedly it kind of speeds up through kind of Andy's sort of initial getting to prison, and then kind of moving into his friendship a little bit more with Red. You'll see them start to talk a little bit about, I think, Red says something, it was the first time he'd said more than two words to anyone, after he'd been in there a couple of months. And you start to see their kind of friendship and their camaraderie, and the way that these characters really kind of interact with each other in the prison, which is one of my favorite kind of aspects of prison. It talks a little bit about kind of the mundanity and kind of the day in, day out, but it's not really a prison story as much as it is a story about these characters and kind of the mental sort of bits of dealing with the prison versus dealing with bad guards and other bad inmates, and all of this stuff, and having terrible food, right? It's not really about that. It's more of kind of this prison of the mind kind of thing that these characters are having to deal with.
Yeah, and also what happens when you spend enough time in this kind of space, right? So if you can get to a place where you're not getting beat up or assaulted, and you're in a kind of got a rhythm, you build friendships and relationships with folks inside this prison, and it feels like a prison until over time, an excruciating amount of time, it sort of feels like home because it's the only thing that and so throughout this 20-year experience that Andy is in prison, we meet a couple of different characters, one of which is James Whitmore's character of Brooks Hatlin. Brooks, you don't know why he's there in the movie. Everybody's innocent. Also, they don't talk about their crimes much at all, which I find interesting. But Brooks had been in prison for almost 50 years. And so, he's quite an old man, played by the amazing James Whitmore. And he kind of runs this library. He runs this library. If that's what we can call it. It's basically a cart with about 25 books on it. And he goes around the prison and says, "Hey, do you want a book? Do you want a book?" And he becomes this kind of cornerstone character because halfway through the film, he gets paroled after being in this this prison for 50 years. And what do you do when that happens? It seems like a great thing, but when you've been in a place for so long and you've given up on hope of ever getting out, you really start to make the best of the situation that you have. And so poor Brooks is terrified of leaving. I mean, he hasn't seen a vehicle. He doesn't know how to exist out in the world. And he's leaving all the people that he's come to know and care about. And so it's a really interesting look at a lot of things in this film. But one of the things that I thought was really special was the way that they talk about institutionalization of inmates over a period of time, and the idea that if we put you in a place long enough, you will be quote unquote rehabilitated. But then there's a period of time where it's too long, where you might as well, is it a part of the punishment is to let you out after you've been so long inside, so that your existence is really defined by this lack of hope and lack of Morgan's Freeman character says it best, where they say they're gonna they give you a life sentence, and that's exactly what it takes.
Yeah, exactly. Because it kind of worms its way into your brain, right? Even if you take out kind of the the horrible aspects of being in prison, it's kind of just this daunting thing that weighs on your mind. And yeah, the section with Brooks is really kind of a beautiful and tragic encapsulation of exactly what that means. Is you've lived the greater bulk of your life in somewhere like Shawshank. And how do we get to know a little bit more about Brooks, right? So we have Andy there, who's I don't know, he's very kind of just floating through this. He doesn't seem to be agitated that he's there. He's just kind of just meandering through this, which I think is kind of plays back on the overall theme of this being a redemption story for Andy. But they eventually, with the help of Red, get sent out to do some resurfacing on this roof. It's an outdoor assignment. I think it was like 12 guys or something like that. But Red pulls some strings and gets Andy and himself and kind of this other kind of core group of prisoners out to do this work. And Andy is there and kind of has the opportunity. And Red says a lot of things really well, but right, he says it's kind of Andy's kind of chance at not really making friends with these guys or getting beers for himself, but he sees kind of this opportunity to just have some normalcy, and to be happy and to make everyone else happy when he overhears a guard talking about some financial troubles that he might be running into. Andy was a banker on the outside and kind of knows the way to help out in this instance, and that sort of kind of gets us into the second act of this movie, where we're really kind of seeing Andy turn from just being kind of this prisoner, just kind of lackadaisically moving through this, to being more kind of pressing and what he's able to offer both the guards and the other inmates, and help out a lot, which gets him placed into the library there with Brooks. And we really kind of see that sort of relationship, and kind of this other side of Andy, where he's really just trying to do good and to find some redemption for himself.
Yeah, I think it's a really good vehicle for a lot of the things that Andy's character does, because one of the pieces that they keep going back to is that Andy, he wasn't the first to break down that first night. He didn't make any noise at all. He has this kind of encasement around him where, even though these horrible things are happening to him, he is attacked a lot at the beginning of his time there. And he doesn't let it really get to him. And so there's a lot of reinforcement of why that is through the interaction between Brooks and Andy's character and in the library. And so one of the things that Andy decides to do with the permission of the warden is to send out a note to the legislator and say, hey, look, we would like some funding for a library. We would really like some funding for a library. Please give us some money for this library. And he does it. And I don't know, it takes like 10 years, but they finally send a bunch of books. And during that time, Andy's character is kind of working out of the library and working with the warden, doing his taxes, doing some of these kind of working with the IRS on behalf of all of the prison guards. And that they continue to kind of use Andy's brilliant banking mind as free skilled labor of getting some of the stuff done. But what they also show is that there's a lot of corruption in the prison system, and this warden is using these kind of loopholes and ways to kind of launder money. It's saying, hey, if you give us a certain amount of money, we will take this skilled labor force that we have at our fingertips as prisoners, and we'll go and build a bridge for you, or we'll go do this and that. And what they end up doing is basically taking that money and funneling it into different people's accounts. And because Andy's so smart, he doesn't really judge the characters, but he and he keeps his head down and he doesn't engage with them too much. But he does. It does come to a head when Andy sees that he might be able to get out after something like 17 years in prison. There another gentleman played by Gil Bellows. His name's Tommy Williams. He is a brand new young kid. He comes in to the prison system. He's been there for a really long time, in and out of prisons. And so he gets to meet Red, and he meets kind of that core group of folks. And he mentions that, hey, he ran into a guy who actually said that he killed this golf pro and his lover, and it wasn't Andy at all. And this is the first time, because they don't talk about the crimes, this is the first time the whole team, this whole group of people, is seeing that Andy really might be innocent. I mean, it's a joke that they all say, hey, we're all innocent here, but he really might be. And because of his relationship, Andy's relationship with the warden, he thinks that if he tells the warden's going to maybe help dig into this further and clear his name. And the warden's not going to do that. Why? Because the warden is horrible and crooked. And
Yeah, that's right. The warden is utilizing Andy for his own benefit there in the money laundering. And yeah, you this is the first time and within the prison that they've talked about Andy's guilt or innocence, the crime he was had supposedly committed. And yeah, everyone's it's starting to realize that, Andy really was innocent this whole time, but Andy never complained. He never, acted like he needed to be, getting out of there. He was, just kind of moving through this existence, and you get a really kind of neat scene between Andy and Red saying, "Well, I didn't kill my wife and that guy, but I was very, isolated and very withdrawn and things, and that's what, forced her into that position in the first place. So, maybe I'm not completely without guilt here. Maybe that's why I was sent here to atone for those mistakes. And I think that really is kind of the crux of the story, and why people can why the story resonates with people so well is that everyone kind of has some of Andy Dufresne in them, right? Whether you've done something horrible or not, but there are things that you feel regretful and remorseful about, and you can kind of see the story of atonement as Andy Dufresne is kind of an any man in that sense, and that you can really kind of place yourself in him and into that mindset and what that means to really make amends and be regretful and make atonements and stuff like that. So I think that that's part, at least the way that I see it, as to why this story is resonates with so many people, and it does a really beautiful job of sort of encapsulating that within Andy, especially in that kind of last section there, like you said, Michaela, where he's basically cooking the books for the warden Norton, to be laundering all of this money. But luckily for us, Andy is a man with a plan. He had that plan way back, kind of at the beginning of the story. We didn't know what his plan was. He told Red it wasn't a plan at all. You think that this is going to be funny when you see this tiny little hammer that I'm going to have Red get for me. But it's a beautiful sort of little kind of like inside joke when the warden takes Andy's Bible and says that, what's inside of this Bible will set you free. And then we find out later that he had something hidden in that Bible all the time. Little,
All the
little,
time.
little tiniest rock hammer.
That's right. I mean, it is kind of funny. I mean, he's been in the prison maybe 2 months now, right? So Andy is just getting Red, learning and getting to know Red. And Red is like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not getting you a hammer. First, you'll use it as a weapon. That's what they immediately think, right? And
Yep.
he's like, no, I just like rocks. I just like rocks, and I wanna make like a chess set. And he does all these things, which is also speaks to when you have nothing but time and you're in a cell, what productivity can be done, right? And what you can do. Because all around Andy's room are carvings made out of different rocks and this chess set that he makes, and a giant picture of Rita Haywood, and then Raquel Welch. I mean, he's got a thing for the ladies, and he puts these giant posters up. But really what he's been doing for this 18, 19-year staunt in prison is trying to figure out a way out. And he's using that little rock hammer to carve himself a giant tunnel in the bedrock, or in the I'm not even sure if, because it's a very like archaic looking prison. It's not like some of the stuff that we see now. I mean, and as you said, it's a real place. So I don't know what that rock is supposed to be made out of, but apparently it's pretty soft. But this little tiny hammer is even smaller 20 years later, because it's been worn down to, a nub.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I love Red, kind of says at the beginning, and then he rehashes it there when we find out that Andy has been constructing this tunnel the whole time. He said that, it'd take someone about 1,000 years with that hammer, but he was wrong. It only took Andy Dufresne about 18 years to do it, which is pretty amazing. And I really like kind of the aspect of that. Like I mentioned kind of at the top, this isn't really a story about being in prison and the brutality of that and what that actually means. And this isn't really a story about Andy's attempted escape. Like, we don't see him working on this at
Right.
all. We're, kind of revealed to this the same time as the warden, and it's really great. They call kind of roll call in the morning, and one of the prison guards is out there. Andy doesn't come out of his cell. They go up and they look, and he's just vanished into thin air. And ultimately, Warden Norton starts throwing these rocks, and one goes right through the poster there, and they see the tunnel, and then it kind of gives you a little bit of a flashback of him crawling through this tunnel and getting into the sewer pipe and crawling through a half mile of raw sewage to get out to the river and free himself. And Andy, to much of his credit, has also taken the opportunity here with all of the money laundering for doing that for the warden. He's created a fake identity, which he's going to use to get that money and then send all of the stuff into the newspapers. So he ultimately gets kind of the last laugh when everyone is he's been wrongfully imprisoned this whole time and is doing kind of this illegal work for the warden, is able to set himself free by keeping his mind busy and not being bitter. Right, it would have been very easy for Andy Dufresne to sit there and bemoan the fact that he's in there wrongfully, but he really used this as an opportunity to kind of examine himself and examine his relationships and work on howing to free himself from this place.
No, I completely agree. And I think, this speaks to the amazingness of how this film was put together and directed, and, all the reasons why it was nominated for these 7 Academy Awards, because the way in which this end part of the film goes down, you really almost think that Andy is going to maybe end his own life. Because he's asked the warden for help. The warden has refused to help him and basically put him in a very, very small space. They call it the hole. It's a very small, lightless, darkness-filled place with a toilet, and that's where he is for a month. While he, has this Tommy Williams character killed. So Tommy's never going to be able to testify and help, even if they got word out to some sort of attorney. Andy's fate is sealed. He's not going to ever leave that prison, especially when he's this useful. But they also leave him in this hole for a month. They let him out, let him know, hey, that guy's dead. You're going to spend another month in here to think about it a little bit more. Just really showing the evil behind the warden and all of these guards that have been just using him, right? So you really think that he's at the end of his rope, and there's a really beautiful scene where he sees Red for the last time. You realize it's the last time, and he says, "Hey, at some point, you're going to get released, Red, and when you are, I want you to go to this town, and I want you to look at this ledge, this kind of ledge of rocks, and there's going to be a rock that doesn't look like any of the others, and I want you to look for that rock, and I've left something for you there." And he's like, "What are you talking about? Did you?" And at first we're thinking that it's something like maybe a picture of his wife, or at least that's what I thought when I was watching this the first time. I was like, maybe this is some money, or I don't know, something that's personal, that might be helpful to Red once he gets out and is released. But you don't really know. And so, of course, Red is telling everyone, hey, we got to look out for Andy. He's not okay. He's not doing well. He's filled with not a lot of hope. And someone says, hey, he just asked me for a 6-foot long rope. So they totally think that he's going to hang himself in his cell. So when they do that roll call, you're like, oh God, is he dead? I mean,
Right. Oh,
you're
yeah.
just, and then they're like, oh, he's not in there. Like there's no one in there. And so we really, just the way this storytelling, this is one of the best storytelling kind of adventures in film that I remember seeing. And we're going to talk a lot about its legacy that it leaves, but that's one of the reasons why there's so many bits that happen in this film that wraps up to tell this really varied and beautiful story and tragic story of friendship and loss and hope and regret. And it's just so well done, and the way in which that friendship between Andy and Red continues, and where one of them escapes, the symbolism, but one of them escapes and one of them finally is set free.
Hmm.
They're really good friends, but Andy not once to asks Red to go with him or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of get the closing there. Red is finally released on parole. After several attempts trying, he finally gets to this last attempt and is, basically tells them, I don't care if you release me or not, because it doesn't matter. And I guess that was enough for the prison board to realize that Red had been broken. And you see Red kind of going through the same steps as Brooks, really lamenting his time on the outside, really thinking of ways that he could go back to prison, basically. And he's kind of in the same room there where Brooks had taken his own life, and you see kind of that going through. But luckily, Red gets a postcard from Andy that lets him know that he has escaped, he has made it to Mexico, and he remembers that promise to go check under that tree, and he does, and eventually makes his way down to Mexico as well. And that's kind of where the movie ends, where they're reunited there on the beach, overlooking the ocean. So that's kind of how the story winds up. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff that we kind of skimmed over, but in a way, Michaela, like I said, this is a movie that covers a lot of ground, but kind of in a way, there's not really like a ton of stuff that happens, because like it's really more kind of a like an intentional kind of look inside of the character of Andy and Red, and kind of what that means. So let's talk a little bit about the legacy of this thing. We'd mentioned that it was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, which you'd said you thought was a big deal. I didn't think that was actually that big of a deal. Not very many people went and saw this when it was out in the theater. So when it was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, that was kind of the surprise. Forrest Gump came out this year, and that was going to win all of those awards, of course. So people really were. I think people were more taken aback that there was this other movie out there that was worthy of 7 Academy Awards that no one had seen. So then it actually got re-released into the theater and ended up making some money. But where this thing really kind of found steam, and why I think that this is, or at least one of the big reasons why I think this is, so well beloved by people and one of everyone's favorite movies. In I think it was 98, Turner Network Television, Turner Broadcasting, purchased Castle Rock Entertainment, who was the movie studio that did this film. And then this movie was on TNT every Sunday for years and years and years. It was on TV all the time.
Oh, well, I learned something new every day. Actually, I was looking into Castle Rock because I was wondering if Stephen King had anything to do with the production of it, because they Castle Rock did all of the Castle anything dealing with Castle Rock, which was most of Stephen King's books, right?
Mhm.
So that's interesting. I didn't grow up with TV, so I didn't know that would be a big reason why it would have this groundswell of folks that have watched it, perhaps. It's interesting because we're going to talk about this a lot this month, because we're gearing up for Oscar season, and there's a lot of films that and a lot of decisions that are made in time that maybe made sense or totally didn't make sense. I think looking back on this, I mean, yeah, everybody knew that Forrest Gump was going to win all of these things. But what I will say that when I ask people what their favorite film is, very, very rarely, I don't think I've ever heard Forrest Gump. I think people can say that it's a great film. And it's not fair to compare these two things, which of course the Oscars tries to do. But I do think it's really interesting that a film that got a lot of nods, but no cigar,
Yep.
is still, wreaking havoc on people's hearts and minds in a for the positive, after experiencing watching the film that
Yeah.
is Shawshank Redemption. I think it's
Well, yeah.
it's just an interesting play that it didn't win any of those things, and it seems and yet it's such a great example of a film that nevertheless continues to inspire even years and years.
Yeah, there's something very, very special about this movie, and kind of rewatching it. I mean, you take a step back and you're kind of looking at it critically, and it's basically without flaw. I mean, it's the acting is all spectacular. the writing, the dialogue is all spectacular. The way that it looks, the cinematography, and the way that it captures this place of the prison, and the different lighting, and the way that it's framing its shots are all really good. But you could say that same thing about a lot of movies. So it's interesting that this became so well beloved and is so you know like you said, it's encapsulated kind of the hearts and minds of at least a whole generation of people. And like I said, I think that for me, the reason that I can see it, kind of in that in that light, how I can understand people to do that is because, like I said, Andy Dufresne is a character that anyone could be. You look at something, let's just take that same year, for example, Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump was a character. We were watching Forrest Gump, but in watching Andy Dufresne, we could have been watching, ourselves, a loved one.
Yeah.
We could have been watching anyone be Andy Dufresne, and I think that's why it resonated so well with people. And then
Yeah.
just to top it off, all of kind of the technical aspects of the film were by all accounts pretty perfect. So
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I mean, so how many times have you seen this? Are you someone who watches this yearly? Is this on your, your regular
no,
kind of
I
review?
I don't watch it very often, and this came out in 1994, so would have only been 12, 13 years old when this came out, so it would have been a little bit too young. This is rated R. There's a lot of language and some other stuff going on, so so not the best for kids for sure. But so I probably wouldn't have seen this until it hit the that weekend, that Sunday matinee.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, legitimately, like, this had to have been on like 2 Sundays a month. So it just came into kind of rotation then. So I mean, I've seen it a handful of times, but it's not something that I go back and rewatch all the time. But kind of, we talked about it in the lobby bar this week, going back and seeing something like Good Will Hunting, going back to this, it's just been nice to go back. And you don't forget how brilliant Shawshank Redemption is, but it's good to go back and revisit stuff
Yeah,
like this from time to time.
for sure. Yeah. No, I think that is one of the things. And when we compare this to other made films that were made from Stephen King novels, The Green Mile, like we talked about Stand By Me already. I mean, there's a few out there. This is
The Shining.
The Shining. I feel like this did a really good job of explaining the terrors of prison and all of the negativity around it without it being over the top. I mean, it's not for kids. This is not a film for children, but I do think that it's not, the violence in it is not so egregious that it steals from the overall point of the film either.
Mhm.
So I really liked that part of it, because I feel that sometimes we look at when we see a prison drama, it is all about all the horrible things that happen, which may or may not be real and true, and that's fine. But I really liked how this danced around that a little bit better. So where you totally got the point across, and in fact, you didn't need a lot of extra gregarious violence, because it was pretty awful, showing you what it did show you, right?
Right.
So I've only seen this film a couple of times. I was like you. I was too young for when it came out to watch it in the theaters, and I didn't have television, so I missed it on Sundays on TNT. So I'm not sure exactly when I saw it, but I do remember being in college, which would have been the early 2000s, and everybody was talking about how this is just a film that everyone has to see. Back at the time, when people would ask me what my favorite film is, I would say Braveheart, because I would, and people would be shocked and say, well, if you're a film buff, why is it not Shawshank
Why is it
Redemption?
not Shawshank Redemption? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know, I just haven't seen that, because I missed the boat on that somehow. And so I've rectified it. I've watched it a few times. It definitely isn't in my regular rotation because it is such a sombering kind of tone. And now I have kids, so unless it's Bubble Guppies, it's not on my playlist for 24 hours a day. So, yeah, I do think that it is a really special film for so many reasons. And again, we're we don't have 2 hours or 5 hours to talk about all the reasons why, but there is definitely people that are in our age group, I think, found this incredibly well-made film as some sort of I don't know, it really speaks to this generation of folks when, and it's amazing how and it's still a pretty perfect film to watch today. It ages beautifully. It's really well done. So well done.
Yeah, absolutely. So let us know at home if you watch Shawshank Redemption on the regular, or when you saw it the first time, and what kind of your thoughts are about the movie. And if you make a Coast of Dufresne, let us know and take pictures. We want to know all that stuff. And you can send that in on our Instagram, Twitter, and Hive. It's at Drink the Movies, and on Facebook.com/Drink the Movies. You can get pictures of ours, episode recaps, the recipes, all that stuff on our website, which is www.drinkthemovies.com. Make sure you're following us on TikTok. We get some videos posted up there of us doing the lobby bar drinks and some other fun stuff. So that's TikTok at Drink the Movies. And make sure if you would like to support the podcast further, you can go check out our Patreon. It's patreon.com/Drink the Movies. We've got some bonus episodes. We've got Avatar coming out here in this next week or so. So take a look over there and see if you'd like to check out any of that bonus content we've got going on. And Michaela, now that we have made it into 2023, we've busted out of Shawshank prison. We've made our way to Mexico. We've had some Dufresne toasts.
Yeah.
We've had nothing but fun. And you know what else would be fun is if people got subscribed to the podcast, right? What's more fun than that?
Yeah, there's nothing more fun than listening to the two of us talk about movies and cocktails. I can't imagine anything more fun. And if you all agree, great. You can find us, even more of us, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and Stitcher and Good Pods, anywhere where Anchor podcasts are supported. We do 2 drops a week generally. That's not on our Patreon. Our Patreon's a whole different thing. If you're like me and don't know anything about this technology, look it up, because it's not hard to figure out. But if you love Drink the Movies, definitely leave us a 5-star review. Tell your friends. We've got a lot of really cool things planned this year in terms of movies and special editions on our Patreon site. So we've got a lot going on, and we're so excited. 2023. This is our 3rd New Year's Day to go over all of the amazingness.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of amazingness, Michaela, we're covering some classics this month. So next week, make sure you tune in. We're going to be talking about The Sixth Sense. But before I do that, before we go see Dead People, I need to make like another, I don't know, like 3 or 4 of these Coast of Dufresne, because they're amazing. And I can't get enough of these now. And I have a whole bottle of a pamplemousse liqueur that I need to take care of.
Well, I got a great idea. You grab the pamplemousse. I'll go get a boat, and I'll meet you on the coast of wherever they were in Mexico, in Juantanilla. I think that's how you say it. Yeah.
All right.
And I'll meet you there, and we'll see everybody next time on Drink
the Movies. Hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies.